So, how familiar are you with the saying, the proof is in the pudding? Are you hungry now? Well, Mark Stoops would certainly agree with this saying, but instead of using pudding, he would replace it with the word analytics. You see, Mark is the CEO of Proof Analytics, where they focus on all things, you guessed it, analytics. But they're using these analytics to not only solve problems, but really get down to the bottom of why things are happening the way that they are, whether it be with business owners, entrepreneurs, startups, creatives. He wants to really meet you where you are and recognize that everything may not be able to be solved in one meeting. Everything may not be able to be solved on your own, but essentially with using data science, with using analytics, with applying all of that to what you and your business have going on, you can make some things work and ultimately help you excel and be exactly where you are. However, what is really the number one problem that they recognize with data science and with analytics? Well, I won't spoil the surprise for you. I'll invite you to tune into episode 152, The Maturity Curve. All right, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Down to Business podcast here with Tamar Turner. All right, moving along, y'all know the content is not stopping. I love the summer, so maybe that's even why I've been in such a great mood lately, just doing these episodes, really wanting to knock them out one thing at a time. But on top of that, I really have to give a big shout out to KitCast. I have to give a shout out to Carson, Mallory, everybody who's been connecting me with these awesome and amazing business owners, entrepreneurs, CEOs, founders, everything of the sort, man. They have definitely not disappointed, and I don't really foresee them disappointing in the future. So nonetheless, keeping the ball rolling here with Mark Stoops of Proof Analytics. So very excited, more so because, well, obviously, I tell y'all I'm excited for every interview, but I'm excited just because I was even learning before I even talked to him. I was learning just what Proof Analytics actually does, what they're focusing on, how they can be of assistance to not only myself, but even others, business owners, startups, founders, CEOs, you name it. So obviously excited for him to really, one, going to teach us some more here today, going to give us the breakdown, the 101 of everything that he's done with Proof, before Proof, and even look into the future. But on top of that, we're really going to learn some things today. He's probably going to drop some, not even probably, he's going to drop some gems on us. He's going to give us some things to even do, maybe some call to actions, but ultimately teach all in the same breath. So very excited for y'all to hear his story, to hear what he does, and even to hear how any collaborations, any things collectively can come together. So Mark, how you doing today? How's everything on your end?
I'm doing fine. It's starting to get hot.
Uh-oh, yeah. So I guess it's something I probably should have asked you first before we even started. So where are you based out of, actually?
I'm in Paradise Valley, Arizona, which is kind of in between Scottsdale and Phoenix.
Okay. Now I heard, so Arizona is one of those places that gets, do you guys, would you say you get all four seasons equally? Is that about right?
No, I would say that we're more like Southern California historically, right? So we have about 8 to 8.5 months of just fabulous weather where it's just like monotonously 45 to 75,
Okay.
right? And then we pay for it big time for
So,
about 3 months, three and a
okay,
half months,
for sure.
where it's 115, stuff like that.
Ooh, okay. A couple of my
Yeah.
boys actually spent their birthdays in Arizona, and I've heard that it can be quite the heat over there, depending on what you're used to. I know me personally, I'm an East Coast guy, so right now I'm in Tampa, so I'm used to definitely not getting all four seasons equally. Definitely getting some here and there, a
Yeah.
lot of rain, a lot of hurricane action, and things like that. But I was telling people, and I was even probably even jinxing us in the same breath and saying that I think this is going to be probably one of our hottest, if not the hottest, summer since I've been down here, and we're definitely paying for it just the same, and it's only July at this point. So I feel that 100%. But all right.
Yeah. I grew up in Houston
Ooh,
where,
okay. Oh, so
and so
you okay?
you would have 100-degree temperatures and 100% humidity,
Right.
right? And I have to say that even though much past 110, hot is just hot, right? Nevertheless, the low humidity here makes it a lot easier.
Okay, and that's what I heard. It's not as much of that. It's more so like that dry heat. It's not really
That's very dry.
sweltering, like you're just out. Yeah, you're just struggling at all times. Okay, so all right, so we're gonna have to get over to Arizona for all my folks who are not from Arizona but listening to this.
Hey, you
But
need to come here and host from here, man.
we can do. Hey, look, don't tempt me with a good time. I love to travel, so we could definitely make something happen. I would love that. Absolutely, I need to explore more. Now, thinking about everything, we're going to have some people from your side tapping in. We're going to have some people from my side tapping in, and we're going to have some people far and few in between. So to get everybody on an even playing field, to get everybody on the same page, to really just start fresh, can you, one, just tell us a little bit about yourself, and then can you, two, just tell us what brings you on the Down to Business podcast today?
Sure. I mean, so I am I've done a lot of things in my life, but I would say that they all kind of generally fall into early days, right? Into marketing and communications. And I was a Newsweek reporter and things like that. And then I went into large corporations and rose very high, and had some of those jobs that I just mentioned there, but also became more and more and more of a business leader who happened to also do some of these things, right? Like marketing. And I was at Honeywell, I was a chief marketing officer for Honeywell Aerospace. And I had been, for like the previous 20 years in my career, I had been really focused on using analytics to make better decisions, not just in marketing, but across different jobs that I had. And I had gotten that to a fairly mature state. And then you kind of realize that so you think you go into this solving certain questions or problems or whatever, right? And as you get more and more and more knowledgeable about it, you discover the real problems and the real questions, the kind of existential or foundational questions. And so we started realizing that the number one thing that was holding analytics or data science back in business was the fact that it was just too damn slow, right? And business leaders would, talk about how data scientists, in their company were always a day late and a dollar short, right? In terms of showing up with the right insights at the right time to make a better decision, to enable a better decision. So we said, you know what, the brute force days are over, and AI and automation are here. And so, 4 or 5 years ago, we built an automated analytics platform called Proof. And it started out as being very focused in the go-to-market area, so marketing, sales, stuff like that. It is now kind of starting to really broaden out. But basically it allows a company or a team or even an individual to say, okay, you know what, I want to understand why things are happening the way they're happening. I want to be able to look historically and say, I'm doing these 10 things in an effort to generate this particular outcome. How did that work? How did that go? Right? And what is the forecast in terms of how I will be doing into the future? And then as the future becomes the present and I recalculate the models over and over again, right? And I see that I'm doing okay, but there's a difference between the forecast that I should be achieving and what's actually happening. So how do I adjust what it is that I'm doing, particularly given the fact that there's a lot out there that I can't adjust? There's external factors that you and I have no control over, macroeconomics, taxation, whatever, right? So that's really it, right? I mean, the math is not new at all. It's essentially multivariable regression is the fancy term for it. But we have made it very, very attainable. It's very easy to implement it relative to what it used to be. And get it, it happens in real time now. So anytime that you want to be able to, get an answer on a question that you care about, you can do that in a business context. So I think that's probably why I'm here. That's what you really wanted to talk about, right?
Absolutely, yes.
That and kind of the journey, I think.
For sure.
Yeah.
So I hear that you took it back 4 to 5 years ago, essentially, when y'all built this platform. And I think about where we were from a technology standpoint, from a world standpoint. 4 to 5 years ago is definitely, if you
That's
would
pre-COVID.
Definitely pre-COVID. So had you would have
Yeah.
probably talked to some people, they would have never even imagined that we would be here now in 2023. So just thinking about what you guys were able to do back then, what have been really, if any at all, honestly, have been some changes or have been some things that you guys have had to do to stay ahead of that curve per se, or make sure you're staying up to date or working your way through
No,
COVID?
I don't think it's really. I mean, we certainly always improve the product, but the technology this is true for any technology. It's something that helps you scale or speed up something else, right? And at the end of the day, though, the solution that you create with the technology is dependent on what people do with it, right? So when we first launched, I mean, there were early adopters and people who were already switched on, right? But it was really COVID, and more accurately, all the spinouts from COVID, right? All the factors that COVID generated in society and in business that all of a sudden got people's attention, because I think that most people had kind of been operating to that point with this idea that past is prologue, right? And that, hey, you know what? Yeah, things change a little bit, but in general, in my life and my business, what happened last year is probably going to be more or less what happens this year, and what, so on and so forth, right? And the whole COVID period just destroyed that, right? So the variety, the velocity, the volatility of change in that 2.5 to 3 year period was just immense, right? And then following it was this economic situation that we've been moving through, right? And so the ability to do what we were doing before, which was to sort of assume that it was all going to be similar, right? It just got wrecked, right? And so people started saying, okay, maybe I need a tool like this, right? Maybe this. So it's really about, in technology, in the technology industry, we have something called the people process technology triangle, right? Except it's not an equilateral triangle. It's like this. It's very scalene. And the longest leg of the triangle is people, right? People always make it or break it, right? And so that's why, you can make the greatest product. I think this is a key learning, by the way. Um, you can make the greatest software product in the world, and if it's not where the marketplace is at that moment, it won't matter.
I think that's a big gem. Even in our previous episode, we talked about how literally to your point, you can have the best of the best. But if you're not meeting your audience, if you're not meeting your target market where they are, if you're behind or if you're too far ahead, then to them it may sound gibberish, or it may sound as if it's useless, or it may sound really scalene. And for those of y'all who don't really know who those of y'all are who are not math people, a scalene triangle is one where none of the sides are equal to one another. Isosceles, and then we have the equilaterals. But I don't want to give y'all a math lesson today. But nonetheless, it's so easy to get lost in translation, get lost in all
Yeah.
the noise, be so worried about social media and then what's going on here and there, that your product is just is wasting itself in a sense. So I hear what you're saying, and I immediately think about competitors, other people who are out there trying to do the same thing, seeing what you do, seeing what somebody else does, maybe even getting the same question posed to them or same problem brought to them. So when thinking about proof, when thinking about even 4 to 5 years ago till now, what have you guys really done? What are you guys even doing still to differentiate yourself from everybody out there? Because I could understand there's competition. I
Yeah.
could understand that with any industry, when people see a company doing well, or when people see something like just the newest of the new, they're like, oh wow, well if they did it, I can do it type mentality. But everybody,
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. I think that really for us, what it is, and so number one, the category that we're in has exploded in the last 2 years, right? So, and I love that. The more competitors, the better, right? I mean, it demonstrates demand, it validates the category. It's awesome, right? Keeps us on our toes. Where most people though have and this is just obviously my view, right? Um, where they've gone wrong in the way that they have rolled out a product in this area is that if you look at a lot of them, they're gorgeous, they're beautiful, they have lots of capability, right? But they are a data science tool for data scientists. And normal people in corporations who are the ones that need help making better decisions look at those screens and go, what the hell is that? Right? And so they just say, hey, this is Greek to me. I have no idea how do I use this? Right? Um, we took a completely different point of view. We did not compromise the math at all. Right? So the data science part of Proof is like as solid as it gets. But we built a different front end that was totally geared to so-called normal people, right? People who had, their last big brush with regression mathematics was probably in high school or college. It didn't make them feel really smart. So they've been kind of running away from that ever since, right? And so those are the people you have to meet where they are, right? Because if you say, well, no, hey, dummy, right? You need to get over here and learn something. You're not going to sell that product. It's just not happening, right? And so I think that that's one of the reasons why we maintain our leadership. And then also we kept, so we've been very acquisitive. So we have added more products kind of very much in the same space to our portfolio. We've also created new products. So it's you can get more from Proof today than you could 4 years ago, and so I think most of our competition are still siloed. They will compete with us in one area of our offering, but not in multiple areas of our offering, and they also tend to. They are still trying to compete in areas that have already died, right? And I understand why that is, right? It's a very human thing, and it's a very, you're trying to move your business forward. But nevertheless, right? Their revenue is dropping in some of those dead zones, right? And so I think that takes a lot of energy away from them competing with us in our core products.
I love that point for multiple reasons. One, more so just because it speaks to the need for versatility within this space, and how you said that while
Yeah.
a competitor could, and honestly, your competitors are only a competitor to one aspect of your business. And that just goes to show, one, how you're not the same Proof that you were 4 to 5 years ago. You're not going to be the same Proof 4 to 5 years from now that we are talking about in this interview. But I feel like oftentimes companies get so comfortable and get so complacent because they find something. They find something that works. They find something that resonates with people, and they just don't adjust from there. They say, okay, well, if this is what they like, if this is what they want to do with my client right now, if these clients are happy, if they're satisfied, well, let's just stick with it. Kind of like almost if it ain't broke, don't fix it type of mentality.
Yeah.
But sometimes it doesn't really take anything being broken rather than just being behind or just being old or just being outdated. Whereas you said, like, the reason why you guys started to explore different categories was because certain things started to die off. Certain things just weren't really as populous or as just useful as they once were. So the fact that you guys are hitting so many different areas, staying so versatile, I want everybody listening to really take that point and hone in that Proof is in an industry of their own, and recognize that, look, we have competitors, but we're going to quote unquote these competitors because they're only competing with us in one aspect of what we do. When you do so much, when you make yourself so open to adjust, to learn, to get with the times, you open yourself up to more opportunity, to more clients, to more revenue, to anything, instead of just relying on one thing. So my business owners, my entrepreneurs, you have to think about your business. Yes, you do things very well. That's why you came into business. That's why you're so passionate about it. But what can you do more.
Yeah.
Sometimes it really takes exploring. Sometimes it really takes that thing that you may have been scared over, that thing that you felt like, oh, I'll never touch that. I'll never get into that. Get into it. Learn a little bit. The same way, like we said, we go back 4 to 5 years pre-COVID. Who would have ever in their right mind thought COVID? And then I'll even give y'all a personal story just to show where my mind was back then. So I got 2 job offers during COVID. I was in Philly. I was going to relocate to North Carolina. I was happy. All was well. COVID hit. They said, yeah, this is nothing more than just your flu. It'll be over in a couple of weeks. We'll reach back out. It'll be fine. Yeah, a couple of weeks, right? A couple of weeks turned into 4 weeks, another month, another 2 months, and then years came. And then eventually I had to start to pivot. What I wanted to do wasn't, they told me that pretty much they couldn't let new people in the building. So unless I was about to go remote, which wasn't going to happen at the time in sports communication and journalism and producing and all of that, I had to shift my focus a little bit. And oftentimes companies don't realize that until it's too late, until revenue is down and you're scrambling, or now you have to go out of business or anything of the sort. So just to hear what Mark is saying about what they're doing, it only really, if you're smart, you're going to also foreshadow and think that, okay, well, 4 to 5 years, even a year from now, they're probably going to be doing something different. They're going to add something else. They're going to bring on a new client, anything of the sort. So just goes to show that, look, sometimes, look, you're your own competition because you just need to expand. You just need to open up that mind. You just need to become as versatile as possible in your field. Everybody's doing it. Everybody's speaking to it. So now, before you started Proof, we were talking about Honeywell. You've even amassed some other experience prior to that.
Mm-hmm.
Why did you, and I guess I'll ask this, why and what? One, what did you feel along this journey? What did you feel with all the prior experience you had really made you comfortable and confident enough in yourself to become the CEO of this company? And then 2, I'll really go to say, why? Like, why Proof per se? You could have easily stuck with what you were doing. You could have easily stayed and still, and I won't even say by going to Proof, you left that business leadership realm, because you didn't. That's still business leadership, becoming a CEO, building a company, everything like that. But why did you really feel like all the experience, everything that you had amassed really made you ready to become a CEO and to really lead Proof Analytics to where you guys are today?
Wow, that's a big question. So, the way I'll answer it is to say this, right? So this is not my first entrepreneurial thing. 30 years ago, in a completely different space, it was actually the defense sector. I started a business. This would have been like 1992, right? And ramped it, and it was not software related at all. It was, if anything, it was hardware related. Very technology related, and and then ultimately sold it in 1999 to a mainline defense company, and so I learned a lot. It was also really, the last part of it was sort of disillusioning and things like that. I mean, we made a lot of money, but that's not the whole thing. It never is, right? And so I was kind of sitting there right as the clock turned over onto the new millennium, right? And I was like, okay, so what do I want to do now? And a friend of mine's, this was when tech was really running hot in Silicon Valley, and said, man, so much, come join this consultancy in Palo Alto, and we're lighting it up, right? So I did that, and it was great. But then I started, I had grown up in Texas, and part of my growing up years included the oil bust in Texas. And that kind of was tattooed on my subconscious, my memory banks, right? And I started all of a sudden noticing similar things going on in Silicon Valley, and I was like, oh crap, right? And so I thought to myself, okay, so what's the best plan here? Because consulting is probably getting ready to get hammered, right? So what do I need to do here? And it occurred to me that it's not true today, by the way, but it was still true back then, that one of the best places to spend a recession was inside of a large company. And so and right about that time, all of a sudden, a recruiter that was representing the chief marketing officer of Compaq Computer reached out to me and said, "Hey, if I got a deal for you, but I can only tell you about part of it because the other part may not happen and it's very confidential. And so you're just going to have to kind of like go with this or not go with it." Right. And, and I really liked the part of it that he could tell me about. And so I said, yeah, sure. And so they hired me. I mean, and so I was working for and around Michael Capellas, who was the CEO at that time. And I'd been there about 6 months or so. And all of a sudden, he called me into his office with a couple other people and said, "Guess what? We are merging with HP." And he turned to me and he said, "And you're going to be running." So there was going to be this huge proxy fight over the stock and whether or not there were two sides on whether or not this was supposed to happen, what people wanted to happen. And he goes, "And you're going to run that part of it from our side." Right. And I'm like, "Oh, that's cool. I mean, I like that. That's pretty awesome." Right. And then I went into, we did the integration. I was in HP. I was rising and rising. And then I went to BMC Software and I was rising and I was rising. So very much still in the tech business. And it was during this whole period of time that analytics really became a part of my thing. Right. And I became really known for it professionally in the marketplace. So much so that Dave Cote, who was the chairman and CEO of Honeywell, heard or read something. This part of the story varies a little bit depending on who you talk to, right? And basically had one of his recruiters call me, and they offered. I went through a little interview process and all that kind of stuff, but they offered me this CMO role at Honeywell Aerospace. And it was all driven by my experience with analytics, using analytics to make the right investments as a marketing team. And it was hugely successful. And we were spending, a lot of money just on the analytics. We're talking about like $8-9 million a year in that ballpark, right? But that was mainly about people. It was so we were having, in order to get the latency down and the speed of the analytics to where it needed to be in order to be relevant, right? We had to hire a ton of people. And you didn't have to be super smart to figure out that was not a sustainable model, nor were there a lot of companies that either could afford to spend $8 or $9 million on analytics, or who would choose to, even if they could afford it, right? And so that's ultimately how it all went, right? And so one of the things that I really learned from all this, though, is that we are really a product of everything that we have done before, regardless of how well we have integrated it all, right? So some people, they do a lot, but they haven't really created a holistic understanding of all that so that they can play it forward in an even bigger way. And some people have, right? And that makes a huge difference. I think the other thing that's really true, just kind of thinking of things that I could maybe share that would be of value, is that there's a tension when you're an entrepreneur, you do a startup, you do it because you believe that you have a unique point of view, a powerful solution to a bunch of people's problems. And so if you don't have that point of view, you probably shouldn't be an entrepreneur. However, that has to be paired up with the willingness to listen to what the marketplace says to you, right? And to say, okay, you know what? This was my point of view. it's still my point of view, but now I'm kind of seeing how I need to morph this a little bit, change this, right? Because the most powerful thing in the world about doing a startup is that you are co-creating with your customers, with your partners, with the marketplace, right? And if you kind of say, no, I know what you need and you just need to freaking listen to me, okay, that is not going anywhere fast, right?
I would have to agree. It's definitely that one thing that life taught me, but especially being a business owner, entrepreneur, talking to multiple, it can never be my way or the highway. Or if it is, it will definitely not last long. You will be out of there, or your business will be out of there just the same. So I really do think that that flexibility, just that ability to be able to adapt, adjust is so crucial because one, it'll teach you about yourself too. You'll learn things along the way. You'll be offered different perspectives. You'll sit down in meetings. You'll sit down with other customers, clients, and they'll pose things to. It's nothing better than when you learn from a customer or client when originally they came to you with something, with a problem with, and you may have the solution, but along the
Yeah.
line you learn that your solution may need to be tailored to fit this particular person, and every solution is not going to just be step by step for everybody. You may have to take some stuff out. You may have to add some things in. You may have to get really specific here. So, no, you really make a great point in that. And just being able to sometimes just be able to take a step back and not be just that demanding, like you said, hey, just listen to me. This is it. I got what you need, all of that, because you'll find out quickly that while some people, you may not necessarily say it just like that, some people will take it, some people will get it, but a lot more times than not, you'll turn people away every single time and you'll quickly see it. So, for someone out there, for a business out there, entrepreneur out there, business owner, whatever we want to call it, for someone to come to you and say that, hey, I run my business just fine without really honing in on analytics or really tapping into that or really spending this money on that, spending time on that, bringing people in to really show me and tell me what's really going on with analytics. Is it more of a convincing from you and proof side? Is it more so you guys just let really the facts and the numbers speak for themselves? Do you guys have a way to kind of ease people into this because I'm pretty sure you've probably dealt with people who have no idea what y'all do, who may need your services through and through, but really don't know where to start or really don't even
Yeah.
know within.
No, I would say this. It's like so many things in technology and in life, right? Um, you're the way that you either accept or don't accept something is based on where you are on the maturity curve, right? And that's not a critical statement. That's just a statement, right? Because I guarantee you, there's areas where I am way high on the maturity curve, and then as my wife would remind me regularly, there are other areas where I'm not so high, right? And so I think that so in marketing, there's this idea of the ideal customer, right? We call it the ideal customer portrait when we kind of try to sum it up, the ICP, right? And this is not even remotely the same thing as the TAM, the total addressable market, right? The ICP is a very, 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 that's three varies, okay, small fraction of the TAM. These are the people who are your ideal customers, who should be buying from you, right? And I think that too many startups in a quest for revenue try to shotgun this whole thing into the marketplace, right? And kind of, well, let's just see who buys, right? Well, that's a really sloppy approach. And unless you have some investors with almost bottomless pockets and bottomless belief in you, right? You will spend a lot of investor dollars trying to make that work. This is where you got to really do your research. You got to really listen. And you got to say, okay, you know what? Right now, at least, even if they're willing to buy from me, okay, it's going to only end in tragedy because, and they're going to churn, okay, because they're not ready for this. So then you have kind of two choices. You can either say, you know what, why don't you check back with us in a few years or something, something like that, right? Or, and this goes to your earlier point, right? You say, hey, there's a business here. It's maybe not a software business, maybe it's a services and consulting business, but there's a business here that's all about helping people get ready. It's all about helping people move up that maturity curve, right? And it has really nothing to do with software at that point, right? And we did that, right? I mean, because there were a lot of people, and are a lot of people today, a lot of teams, a lot of companies who were like, oh man, you know what? Exactly what you were saying. I really think I need this, and I have not one clue how to get started, right? And so either as proof, or we have a lot of alliance partners that also do this kind of thing, right? We will hook them up with a program that will get them to a point where they understand what's really going on. They become prepared with data. They become prepared with logic, really knowing how to think about this whole thing. So that then when they implement the analytics, they actually get enormous amounts of value from it. For those who say, well, you know what, I'm not even sure I really need this, right? I would just say this: do you need a GPS when you travel? Okay, well, why? Why do you need a GPS as opposed to a phone, to a map, right? Well, the main thing is the map is static. It might have been printed 5 years before. It might not be updated. And it sure as hell is not going to show you all of the obstacles that are happening right now in front of you that's going to speed you up or slow you down, right? A GPS will. And so, and when you, by the way, just so that people kind of really complete this analogy in their heads, when you're sitting in your car and you say, okay, your GPS on your phone obviously knows where you are, right? And you say, hey, I want to go over here. And it gives you 3 choices, right? On routes. And each one is a little different, a little bit of, different time that it's going to take. Maybe one is the scenic route and one is the freeway and one is some other kind of route, right? These are forecasts. Just like a sales forecast, a business forecast, these are forecasts. You pick one, right? You start driving, it is tracking you and it's tracking all the stuff that's going on around you. And at some point, the forecast that it originally gave you maybe isn't the forecast now, right? So maybe there's been a big accident ahead of you, traffic is piling up, and it says, hey man, this was great, but now it's not so great. And if you stay on this route, you're going to be an hour late to your dinner. But if you go right and go left and go right and go right again, right, you'll be 8 minutes late to your dinner. What do you want to do, right? That is true for businesses too. And the other thing I'll just point out is that, and by the way, this is the same thing that used to happen with maps when people used them to help them with a journey, is most of what passes for forecasting in businesses or in travel is an extrapolation, right? It says, okay, it's always been like this, more or less in the past. So that means it's going to probably be like this again, right? But has that worked for anybody in the last 3 years? No, it hasn't, right? In almost every area of life, I can just speak for my own life, right? It is radically unpredictable. And it was actually really pretty damn predictable for a long period of time. I mean, the unpredictability was sort of in the margins, right? Now it's like right in the middle. And that's why we need this kind of stuff. We need analytics, we need tools like this, right? Because the human brain can't handle, like literally, it can't handle more than about 3 or 4 variables. And if one of them is also time lagged, that means that it takes several months, maybe even longer, between when something happened and when you see the result of it. Then the human brain just shreds, right? I mean, it can't. So it needs help, and proof and things like proof or that help.
I get it, man, and I really even hear in that it's basically y'all way of saying that you can do it all on your own. Nobody's stopping you, but how long will it take you to reach your goals? Will you reach your goals? Will you give up along the way? What obstacles will come that way? Will you be able to overcome these? There's so many just different things that, like you said, whereas before you probably were able to clear cut answer. Even about life, I was thinking about my life too, and how at some points, yeah, you could pretty much have a pretty good guess as to what was going to happen, morning, afternoon, night. Like, you pretty much knew, and now I feel like that's not the case. I don't know if it was between me becoming an adult, me having responsibilities, COVID, a little bit of everything, but also too, when you translate that to business, it's forever unpredictable. You have to take the highs with the lows, but are you in control? Are you in control of these highs? Are you in control of these lows? Are things just kind of happening willy nilly? Do you know what's going on? Do you know what's around that corner? Do you want to know what's around that corner? So I get that a lot, and I hear so much in these businesses and these platforms and these softwares that you guys essentially have taken the problem, have taken it on yourselves, and you're really just trying to simplify things. You're trying to cut out all the extra noise. You're trying to cut out the middleman in some cases, and really just give people the clear cut proof, no pun intended, that that things that this can happen, that this can work. Okay, so now for what you guys do, would you say that I understand that this is really technology and all within this field and everything. But for who proof serves, for even your subsidiaries, for even your partners and people that you have with you, would you say that you guys are truly industry specific? Have you guys kind of been able to amass different clients from different places and different spaces? Have you guys been able to offer really your services across the board? Because I know that we spoke about earlier just the versatility when it came to the competitors and how that they may be in this space with you here, but if you look at 3 or 4 other spaces, they're not really matching up with you at all. So for everybody tapping in, for the range of just audience that I have, from entrepreneurs to business owners, creatives, founders, CEOs, everything like that, would you say that you guys focus on a particular industry, or could anybody in some?
No, literally anybody, right? I would say that where things become verticalized is, again, this maturity curve idea. So highly regulated industries, pharma, healthcare, aerospace, automotive, things like that, right? Are going to be, in terms of data and analytics, they're going to be much higher on the maturity curve. And so they will like totally get proof really, really fast, right? And go, yeah. Okay. I'm trying to think of a really great example of one that doesn't. I would say that the legal profession, right? I don't think we have a single law firm, even the like really big ones, right? That are customer proof, not because it wouldn't work for them, right? But because, or that they don't need it. I think that they actually could really benefit from it, but that's just not where their head is, right? And we could spend the time to evangelize the legal vertical, right? And we could probably start to get customers in it, but is that the best use of our time and resources? So evangelism is incredibly expensive, right? And not just monetarily, it's emotionally and psychologically very expensive because you are going to get so many more rejections than yeses. And and from my perspective, and this has nothing to do with me not wanting to help people, right? But I, like every business leader, every person, right? You have to decide how you're going to spend the limited amount of time and energy that you have, right? And and so, we tend to prioritize industries that are more, that are higher up.
I like that. I like, because like you said, some people just, it's not that they don't need it. They just don't get it, or they're just not there, or that. I really like the concept that you put. I'm gonna have to start using that. That maturity curve is different for everybody. I really love that because I feel like even within the business ownership and the entrepreneurial world, it can even really be attributed to life.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say this seriously. I mean, we live in a multivariable world, right? Very complex, which means that there is no such thing as a silver bullet. There's never one thing that's going to make it all work for you or destroy it all for you. That's not real, except for one thing, and that is where a person or an organization is on the maturity curve of understanding whatever it is and prioritizing whatever it is that you happen to be talking about, right? Because if they're low only because of what they don't know and otherwise they really want it, that's a different proposition, right? And that goes to what I was saying earlier about, hey, you launch services and stuff like that to help them get ready for the tech, right? But otherwise, it's not where it's not where you need to be. It's not going to work, right? That if they're not ready, willing, and able, and eager, and totally committed, right? It's not going to be good. And so where it's really, I mean, from a purely entrepreneurial point of view, now for a second, churn is what kills you because it costs you a lot of money to win that customer, right? Ideally, you're trying to amortize that cost of acquisition over a pretty lengthy period of time and revenue from that customer. If that gets truncated, then you're kind of screwed, right? Also, it's a reputational hit because if some other potential customer finds out that this customer tried it, didn't like it, and blew you off, right? Then that's not going to be good for your new prospect, right? So what we learned early is to be rigorous about meeting number one. I'm sure that there's some people who are listening who have been in meetings with Proof, right? You probably noticed that it's all about why you shouldn't do this, right? So we want you to, if you need to be disqualified, if you're not ready for doing this right now, we want you to say so. We want you to go, oh crap, I'm not there, right? Save yourself some time, save us some time, a lot of agony, a lot of suffering, all that kind of stuff, right? Nobody wants that. I don't want that for my customers, right? So that's what it comes down to is learning to say, you are my customer and you're probably not ready to be my customer, and stick with that.
I like that. I like that because that's not always the easiest thing to do. That's not even always the easiest realization to have as a business owner, as an entrepreneur. That sometimes you have to go back to the drawing board, or sometimes what you thought was working, when you get exposed to really a system, a platform where it's tested, proven, tried through and through. You're like, wow. well, this opened my eyes to something. And while I definitely need this, I'm not here right now. So let me get my ducks in order. Let me get things back together, and then we will definitely reconvene this. So I like that though, and I like how you get to it right from the get go.
So, so when you start, when you become an entrepreneur, right? The kind of person who does it most of the time is somebody who's very driven and who wants to win, right? And win means a lot of things to a lot of people, but one of the definitions that's very operative in most entrepreneurs is that they want to successfully persuade the prospect to become a customer. It's what kind of makes them feel validated, master of the universe, kind of powerful, right? All that kind of stuff, right? And yet, that is probably one of the most self-destructive things that you can do as an entrepreneur. You have to become really good at walking away, knowing when to walk away, knowing how to walk away, because you don't want to do it in a way that creates scar tissue for anybody, right? So, but you have to be able to really see that situation clearly and know how to disengage appropriately, right? So that nobody gets hurt, including you and your team, right? So I think that's so important, and that there are a couple of things. There's probably 5 things that fall into that category of being a core learning in being an entrepreneur. That's certainly one of them.
I'd have to agree 100% with you, man. It's a journey indeed, but it's just like at what step of the journey are you? Are you forever just keeping that open mind? Are you a my way or the highway type person? Does it take really getting hurt to then tighten up or buckle down or really realize that this is not it? So
Actually, given that you just said that, let me,
yeah,
if it, can I add one more thing?
absolutely, please do.
Yeah. So I think that if you are willing, so being an entrepreneur, you don't hear this much, but it's really true. It is suffering. And if you have the right attitude about suffering, there's no way that it cannot make you a better person. There's no way that it cannot humble you in the best sense, right? If you go, I mean, and this is true for a lot of entrepreneurs, and I have to say that it was once upon a time true for me too. You just think that you are the smartest guy in the room, and it takes a while to have that beaten out of you. And that's typically the way it is. That's the way it happens. It is beaten out of you through all kinds of challenges and experiences. I mean, if you think that you are somehow God's gift and that you're the MVP, I got a news flash for you. Proof would be, and I'm not saying I'm not smart. I am, right? But proof would be nowhere without everybody else, right? And so it's like one of the reasons why I no longer refer to myself as a founder. I just say I'm CEO, is that at one point, most of the IP in Proof was my IP. Okay? But today, that's not even remotely true, right? So many people have contributed to the platform and what the platform does and our learnings and all this kind of stuff, that for me to somehow say that even 50% of it is mine, it would be a kind of a laughable thing, right? And so I think that not everybody is meant to be an entrepreneur, and we have sort of glorified, particularly in the tech space, being an entrepreneur, and we have acted like Steve Jobs and people like him are the norm, when in fact they are the really big exceptions, right? And so it's just you have to really know up front that even if you happen to be really successful financially with it, it's just a different kind of pain. It's a different kind of suffering, and you just, but you'll never say it's not suffering. Even you read like what Steve Jobs wrote in his diaries in the last couple of years of his life. I mean, damn, I mean, you want to talk about, it wasn't just cancer that laid him low and that humbled him, right? It was seeing how the rest of Apple continued to succeed without him. I mean, if that doesn't, and it did in his case, right? He was like, oh, man, crap, man. I thought I was so cool. And, you don't really realize how supported you really are until all of a sudden you're not.
I like that. Oh, I like that. The power of perspective, man. It's whoo, it can make or break things, but it really does truly take a genuine and authentic individual like yourself to even realize that, like you said, why you say founder, CEO, why you even do that is because look at where proof is now. To take all that credit to just say that that was under me because I started all this. No, I started this, but I had people helping me build the foundation. Think about a house. There are so many different things that go into a house. Yes, you can build a house from the ground up. Yes, that person on that house can take the root work because he was the head of that project. But think about all the contractors. Think about the electricians. Think about the carpenters. Think about everything that went into that to get that house to be that beautiful thing that you see. Man, you just
I'll say this too, right? I mean, you don't hear this very often, but you should. You should hear it all the time from CEOs, right? Founders or not, right? Part of my job as CEO is to be aware of all the people that I'm meeting, and that when I believe that I may have found somebody who can be a better CEO of Proof than me, that I hire them, right? Uh, the idea that somehow again, because I'm a founder and all that stuff, that somehow that glues me into the CEO's seat, right? Is just not true. It's not true at all, right? It's not even good, right? So I mean, and I love it. I mean, I'm enjoying it, but man, if I all of a sudden met somebody and I was like, crap, man, this lady, this guy is just like, could take Proof into a completely different altitude, particularly given how much I and others own of Proof, we would be insane not to do that. So divorce your ego from your job.
Woo,
right?
tough.
I work to murder my ego every day. And the reason why I have to do it every day, and the reason why I use the word murder, right, is that it tends to always come back, right? Like you can't just spray it with some pesticide, right? It's like you gotta basically burn it. And so it requires, you have to be dedicated to it.
Whew, you're gonna hurt some egos with that one for sure. But it's the ultimate truth, man. And I love as someone who really loves the importance and takes pride in just words and how you say things. I think that murder is just right because when you think about murder, there's no coming back from that. It's no just a rekindling like a fire. It's no just like you said, the pesticides, and it just dies down for a little bit and it comes right back. When you extinct it, when you exterminate, when you get rid of it completely, man, who knows what it can do for you, and who knows that sometimes the biggest blessing to your business, to what you're doing, to your craft, could be someone you don't even know. Could be a complete stranger, could be a supporter, could be someone in your midst. And I love that you put that into perspective like that. So before we close out, wrap things up, I want to give you also the opportunity, while I feel like you have given so much value today, while I feel like people are going to need to just fast forward my parts and really just listen to Mark's parts, because he was really the one doing all the gem dropping today. I also want to leave you the opportunity to, one, just highlight or touch on anything that we may have glanced over today, or anything that we may not have even spoken about. But also, in that same breath, I want to give you the opportunity to even leave some last words, some advice, some gems for my startup founders out there, for my business owners out there, for my entrepreneurs out there, for people who may not really know where to go right now, who may be lower on the maturity curve than others, who may not really even know how to divorce that ego, who may have too much ego right now and it's being challenged. So I'm giving you the floor again. Please give me everything you got.
So I think probably most entrepreneurs have heard the phrase about needing to pivot their business, right? And I once worked for a CEO who, if you used that phrase, like if you're running a division of the company or whatever, and you're saying, "Hey, I think we need to pivot," his response would have been, "So that means you were totally wrong. You totally screwed up. You didn't get it right." Right? Which is really wrong. Like, you want to talk about wrong? That's about as wrong as it gets, right? At least in business, right? And so one of the things that a pivot can be, because you realize something new, right? Can also be because circumstances in the marketplace change, right? Being able to see that clearly is really what analytics is all about. Being able to see that need clearly when you're going from point A to point B and using a GPS is what a GPS is all about. And so, my oldest son, I'm telling you this story among other things just to be real here. My oldest son loves to razz me about the fact that I don't use a GPS if I know how to get there, right? And he's like, "But you're missing your own point. It's not just about the route. It's about what's happening along the route, right? And just because you happen to know the way there, you don't know, you can't, you don't sit there in a helicopter above your car and say, oh, I can see way far ahead, right? And I need to do something different." And he said, "So what the hell?" Right. And he's absolutely right. He's absolutely right. Right. So don't be that guy with your business, right? The more you use analytics, there's so many different ways. You were saying this earlier, right? I mean, you can do multivariable regression analytics in Excel. It will take an enormous amount of effort. You will spend an enormous amount of time even learning how to do it. Okay. But if you want to, you can do that. That's not really the main point here. It's have a way of understanding what is going on around you that is making it necessary for you to change course. Life and business are an exercise in navigation. The winds change, the currents change, all kinds of stuff changes. And if you don't know how to compensate for it, you're going to find yourself way off course, right? And you will not get to the golden pail of money at the end. You will be just sailing through open ocean, right? With nothing else on the other side. So that would be one of my big points here is don't refuse the help. Again, help is available to you in many, many ways. Okay. Which basically means that you really don't have a good reason to refuse the help of analytics. It will make you smarter, which is what you want to be. You don't want to stay as smart as you are right now. You want to be smarter. That's my big point.
I don't think you could have put it any better than you have. Honestly, I really do think a lot of what I even said in the beginning about what you were going to give us today, you did just that. And you really took terms and took principles and took lessons and took valuable learning points, and you really just not only applied it to yourself and proof and to life, but to the global and to how that I feel like a lot of times people come on here, or they no, not even y'all, but the audience, they get tuned out when they hear a specific industry or a specific niche or specific to something that may not be what their business can hone in on or help on. But I need y'all to also listen to time and time again, 140, 150, 160, when we get to 200 episodes, everybody is essentially saying the same thing. Yes, they're tailoring it towards what they do and how they came into business and the lessons they learned along the way. But if you really break these things down, if you really put that pride to the side, murder that ego for a second, you will really realize that ultimately everyone who we've talked to, everyone who has given us gems, value, got down to business with us, are saying the same thing. It's just different industries, different locations. Arizona versus Tampa versus New Mexico versus Australia. We're everywhere, but essentially all these people are dealing and moving and grooving through life, and it all boils down to the same points. So, like I always say, man, look, Mark did what he had to do today. Mark said what he had to say today. Mark put the ball in everyone's court out there. It's up to you in whatever capacity you take that ball, whether you just pick it up and re-rack it, whether you pick it up, you start to dribble a little bit, pick it up, do a drill, pick it up and shoot, pick it up and pass. However you do it, whatever, it's ultimately up to you. So now, Mark, before we close out, can you just tell everybody, when it comes to tapping in with Proof, when it comes to wanting to find out more information, explore the businesses, the services, what are the best places to reach you and the team over at Proof?
So the website is proofanalytics.ai. I am, and other team members as well, are really super active on LinkedIn. So sending me a private message through LinkedIn, or even just responding in the middle of a thread, in somebody's post or whatever, is a great way to reach me. I will always respond. I just never don't respond. Likewise, I don't use LinkedIn to sell. What I mean by that is, I realized, I don't know, 5 years ago, that I could either sell on LinkedIn or I could help people on LinkedIn, but I couldn't do both, because as soon as I start to sell, all the shields come up and I can't help anybody. Right. So I will not pursue you. I will not chase you. I will, all that kind of stuff. If you say, hey, I would really like to get a demo of Proof and I'd really like to have a conversation, I will absolutely set that up for you. Right. But we're not going to chase you at all. We got a lot of business. Right. So we don't need to chase anybody. And so, I just, I think that those two, email is not a good way to reach me. I do have an email. It's mark.stoos@proofanalytics.ai. But even though I am 57 years old, I am such a technology guy that I'm more like 30. And, you look at people of that age group, right? They don't use email very much, right? And so I'm kind of very much that way, right? So that's what I would suggest. Twitter, I'm also still on Twitter. I use it very narrowly, and so you can always reach me on Twitter as well.
Perfect. Yeah, you said 57. You don't look a day past 30. So I'm glad you operate on the technological side of us.
Actually, I gotta. Since you said that, I gotta tell you this. It was so freaking funny. So these apps on the iPhone where you take a picture and it tells you how old you look. So my youngest son, thinking that he was going to burn me, right? He goes, I bet you look, really old, and so he takes this picture. This was like 6 months ago. Takes this picture, and it does this little thing for a bit, and then comes back and says 41, and I'm like, in your face, dude.
Got him. I love that, man. Well, Mark, I'm definitely extending my gratitude, my thanks to you to everybody over there at Proof Analytics. Like I said, big shout out to Kit Caster for connecting us. But honestly, everything that you did for us today, everything that you said to us today, one, it didn't strike me from a selling standpoint at all. So I definitely can attest to what you just said in that respect. But I appreciate you too, also offering yourself to my audience, to even people tapping in for the first time. It definitely does mean a lot. But as I always say to everyone out there, don't take these connections, don't take these open arms and call to action. Please don't take them for granted. These are people who have been there, who have done that, who are trying and moving and grooving. And like he said, 4 to 5 years ago, he wouldn't have predicted what was happening now. So who knows what's going to really be going on 4 to 5 years from now. So while it's in front of you, while you're here in some capacity, in some form or fashion, I definitely encourage everyone to take advantage.
Well, and I'll tell you this too, to your audience, right? Do me a favor, okay? Get on this podcast with your own gems to drop, okay? Because, and I'm speaking totally selfishly here, right? I actually am a insane podcast listener. I mean, I just pretty much just blow through them. I eat them, right? That's the way my youngest son refers to it. And so I'm always looking for those. So if you have gems to share and you keep them to yourself, you're not helping me or anybody else, right? And even though I certainly think I've learned a lot, I've not learned anywhere close to all of it. And so there's probably something that you have that can really help me. And so I would just ask you to remember that.
I have to attest to that. Please do. Please. We're always, I've learned so much just in my almost 3 years of doing this. So, man, the sky's the limit. So let's continue to make it happen. So, Mark, once again, thank you so much, man. I tip my hat. I thank everybody else on your side, on my side, everybody in between. I love y'all. I thank y'all for tapping in. This has been another episode of the Down to Business podcast here with Tamar Turner.